Good afternoon, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Tuesday, June the 26th. Well, I think the biggest news of the day is actually something like 18 months old, and the news is that Senator Mitch McConnell, leader of the Senate Republicans, in the year 2016, with his unprecedented blockade of Merrick Garland as a nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court by Barack Obama, delivered a gift that keeps on giving to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Just in this week alone, in 5-4 decisions, the U.S. Supreme Court has rendered decisions that have done these things. It's helped keep in business misleading and dangerous, even, anti-abortion pregnancy centers in California. It's endorsed gerrymandering of congressional districts for racial purposes, racial discriminatory purposes. It's delivered a decision that is bad news for equal rights for gay people. And now also today it's upheld Trump's ban on travelers from certain countries he has said quite clearly, aimed at keeping Muslims out of the United States. It's a sad day for justice with these 5-4 decisions. Some pretty tough dissenting opinions, but they're just that, dissenting opinions. They have no effect in law. Speaking of judges and tough decisions, yesterday Wendell Griffen, late in the afternoon, issued a ruling affirming his finding of a contempt of court against the Department of Human Services for continuing to insist that it can't properly assess disabled people's need for home care with real live human beings, but must be able to use a computer algorithm that has the effect of reducing the amount of home care many disabled people get. The judge was dismissive of the state's arguments, said they were imbecilic in some cases. He's referred two lawyers for review by the state Supreme Court Committee on Professional Conduct. Their actions were so uninformed and so bad. One of those lawyers, by the way, is David Sterling, a Republican former candidate for Attorney General who now seeks a seat on the state Supreme Court. Do we want an imbecile on the state Supreme Court? That seems to be Judge Griffen's message. Speaking of the law, State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, who's been implicated but not charged in a bribery scheme involving a state recipient of Medicaid dollars, resigned last week from his law firm, Steele Gray Wright. Voluntarily, Nate Steele, the managing partner, says he has other fish to fry, other things to focus on, and that's, of course, the possibility of perhaps federal prosecution over allegations made by Rusty Cranford, the former lobbyist, that he paid Hutchinson money to get good legislation for that company. Hutchinson said it was just purely legitimate legal fees. We learned yesterday that the Little Rock Air Force Base will not be one of the military bases chosen to house immigrants taken into custody by the U.S. They'll go instead to bases in Texas. We don't know yet if the U.S. government's going to move ahead with using a former fish farming facility down in the Delta of Arkansas as a place to hold detainees. It's very close to where the U.S. shamefully interned Japanese-American citizens in World War II. It's the same sort of thing. There seem to be differences now in how the Trump administration is enforcing the border policy because of the outrage that's emerged over it. Sort of an interesting legal story developing, and you can see all the details on arkansasblog.com. Tom Thrash, a class action lawyer in Little Rock, is continuing his 18-year battle to get justice for State Farm insurance policyholders who didn't get the highest quality replacement parts when they had car wrecks and had to use their insurance to get new parts to fix their cars. He lost a $1 billion judgment in the Illinois Supreme Court several years back. He says now they've developed information that this is because State Farm spent almost $3 million secretly funneled through other agencies to elect the critical swing vote on the decision by the Supreme Court that overturned that $1 billion verdict. He now has a racketeering lawsuit that involves this case and against State Farm and others for the loss of that case. It goes to trial in September, but the discovery was just released last week by order of a federal judge, and it's some interesting reading. Well, you may have read about the dispute at the Queen Wilhelmina State Park, a little kiddie train ride, a replica of an old Kansas City Southern train that circled on a miniature track around the hotel and state park there, was slated for closure. The State Parks Division, I thought, had a great idea to build a walking, biking trail there with playgrounds alongside it, but a lot of people have fond memories of riding the little train around the mountaintop, and there was such an uproar put up that the State Parks has folded for the time being, at least, and is going to let the man continue to operate his train and mini golf course and snack bar. At least as long as he continues to operate in terms of the agreement, he'll continue to operate there. The State Park says the healthier trail that would undoubtedly reach more people is not yet totally dead just yet. Well, the New York Times reported this morning that Donald Trump may be souring a little bit on Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She certainly tells all the lies she needs to tell for her boss, but he thinks perhaps she just hadn't been uncivil enough. Should have walked out on the correspondence dinner He says he's grading her performances and seeing where she's just mean enough. This from the woman who says that she's always respectful to people and can't understand why she'd be invited to leave a restaurant. And finally, this note, a good piece of good news. Lisa Spear, who'd been the state historian archivist, got a national award today for all the wonderful things she's done in improving the state archives here in Arkansas. This came from the Council of State Archivists. You may remember that Lisa Spear was forced to resign by Stacey Hurst, the director of the Department of Arkansas Heritage. Just couldn't get along with her, no matter how good a job she did as state archivist. Well, there are lots of things to resist. As ever, I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.